um, mental health, behavior and mental health. If you have a loved one that's suffering, or you know someone that's suffering, I'm going to share with you some tips. I am not a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist. I am a layman just like you. I got my information like everybody else does. And the National Suicide Hotline, I spelt it wrong. I put a B instead of an N in there, but it's the National Suicide Hotline number in the United States. You would call 1-800-273-8255. Again, the number is 1-800-273-8255. And if you have a pen and pencil with you, you may want to consider taking some notes so that if you have questions or need clarifications on something that I say, I'll be able to. The room will open up once I'm done with everything. I share everything first, and then I open up the room so that people have an idea of what's going on. How are behavior and mental health related? Behavior includes the things we say, the places we go, body language, gestures, and movements. Behavior may be affected by the following: personality, moods and emotions, relationships with other people, culture, current life events, physical illness, mental illness, or other mental disorders. You can be dual diagnosis, for example, with drug addictions, medication, drug or alcohol use, and other circumstances such as tiredness, pain, stress, or confusion. The reasons why we do these things are complex. Nobody fully understands the reasons for all of their own behavior. We all do some things without realizing it or knowing where the behavior came from. Mental illness affects the way people behave. You may feel that your relative's illness has a big impact on their behavior, but there may be excuse me, other things that affect them too, such as those mentioned in the list that I just stated. So we can only give a general tips on how someone with unusual behavior to help them. Delusions and paranoia, for example. Delusions are false beliefs. I want to reiterate that. Delusions are false beliefs. For example, you may have a relative that believes people are trying to poison them, or they're they're being targeted by the police, or that they're on a special mission. People often have delusions as part of their psychosis. And psychosis, I'll go into at another time. It's a very simplistic definition. Remember that your relatives truly believes these things. You are unlikely to be able to talk them out of it when they're when they are unwell. Your relative may not be able to accept logical arguments at the moment. Now, here are some things to avoid. Laughing. It may be tempting to laugh if your relative's belief is very unusual. However, try not to do this. It might upset them and or make them angry. You also may want to try to avoid agreeing with the beliefs. You may feel that it's easier just to agree, but you shouldn't do this because there is a chance you could strengthen their beliefs. Now, directly challenging beliefs. You may want to say something like, "Oh, well, that's not true," or "That's ridiculous." But this is very likely to cause an argument. Research shows that if you confront your relative about their behaviors, they may end up believing them more. Here's what you might want to try, like listening, acknowledge feelings. This must be very frightening, or how do you feel? Building trust. You can say things like, "I'm on your side. I want to help," or maybe if we talk about it, you may feel less anxious. And you can exploring evidence and giving others explanations. Sometimes you can try to get your relative to look at the evidence for a practical belief. This is not the same as challenging. For example, you could ask the following questions: Did you see where he walked to? Could he could have just been walking in the same direction a few times because he lives nearby. It may be best to ask these questions at different times. Your relative may become distressed if you ask them too many questions at once. Sometimes you can try persuading your relative to test their belief. For example, if they think their food is poisoned, you could offer to taste it for them. You could ask them why they think it's poisoned. If they think that they are being followed, you could offer to go for a walk with them. Try not to be disappointed if your relative continues to have delusions. Reassurance. Your relative may feel things are going on that are really not happening, or feel worried about things that are not real. You could try to comfort them and help them feel a little safer. You can do this by reassuring your relative. When reassuring someone, be careful, as they may become reliant on you to reassure them at any time of the day. Things you can try to keep this from happening. Excuse me. Saying, for example, the following things might help. I know you think the police are following you, but I haven't seen any evidence of this. You don't need to worry. You haven't done anything wrong. So the police will not be interested in you. Distraction. You may feel as though your relative spends a lot of time worrying about their beliefs. They may seem obsessed with them. The following things also may help. Suggest that your relative tries something else to keep their mind off of things. Set boundaries so that you can only discuss a particular belief at certain times. It may also help to set a time limit for how long you will talk about the belief. Suggest that your relative talks to their GP. The GP would be your general practitioner, about the way they feel because of the situation. Your relative might not want to speak to the general practitioner or GP about their beliefs, but they may be willing to talk about their feelings. Not every conversation will go as well as you would like. Many careers tell us that their relatives have an answer for everything, or their caretakers, I should say. They have an answer for everything, and that it can be a trying to discuss things. Make sure you take regular breaks from the situation if you feel this way. You might find it particularly difficult to deal with a situation if your relative believes that you have harmed them in the past, or that you will try to harm them in the future. Because of the nature of their beliefs, they are unlikely to accept anything you say or do to prove that you care about them and want to help. In this situation, you can keep in contact in writing if things are difficult face to face. You could do this by email or a letter or a text. It may help. It may also help if someone else who is not involved in the situation talks to your relative. This could be a very different family member or friend. It can be very difficult for you or your relative is having delusions rather about you. You might want to get some extra support in this situation. This is why I would suggest that you talk to whoever they're seeing for counseling. Talk to their counselor. Have your relative wait in a waiting room, even if it's your son or daughter. This way you can say, listen, here's what I've been doing. I don't want to stifle him or her. But what this is the routines that I find myself. Here's my feeling, and then let the therapist help you with some good psychiatric help, so that you know how to deal with your loved one. What is paranoia? It can be common for people to have suspicious thoughts or worries. When these fears are exaggerated, it is known as paranoia. These fears are not based on fact or truth. They are a real worry to the individual involved. Some may feel threatened by something or somebody. Paranoid thoughts can be a symptom of psychosis. There are three main features of paranoid thoughts: a fear that somebody had been uh, speaking awful of them, or that something bad will happen, a belief that something is because of something of someone else, or beliefs that things are worse than they really are, or they are baseless. The reasons people suffer from paranoia can be different. Someone who has schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder can experience the sort of paranoia thinking someone is after or watching them. People who suffer from severe anxiety disorders can also suffer from paranoia. This is more likely to be the type of thinking something bad will happen in the future. Everyone is different. What triggers paranoia is for one person can be different to somebody else. Now let's talk a little bit about motivation and withdrawals. How can I help with low motivation? When your relative is unwell, you might feel though they have no energy or motivation to do the things they used to do. This is common in people with depression and schizophrenia. You may feel frustrated that your relative will do things to make their situation better, or will not do things to make their situation better. First, you might want to check whether your relative feels tired. This can be a common side effect of medication. A doctor might be able to suggest some options to help feeling tired. Sometimes your relative's low motivation can affect your own motivation. Make sure you take time to do activities you enjoy. How can I help someone with low motivation? Acceptance. Accept that this may be part of your relative's illness or a friend, at least for now, and try not to put too much pressure on them. Encouragement. Try to include your relative in daily activities such as shopping or housework. Be careful not to put them under too much pressure to do these things. You might find that it helps just to ask them whether they would like to help. If they say no, then try maybe a little bit ask after. When you ask them the next time, they might say yes. Organize regular activities. If your relatives get into a habit of taking part in certain activity regularly, they may start to enjoy it. You could suggest activities your relative used to enjoy, or you could explore new activities. This could include going for a walk, jogging, a group or a club, or doing hobbies. Focus on the future, not on the past. Your relative may have lost interest in life because they see things have changed. Reminding your relative of how they used to be may add to this feeling. Instead, talk about things they can do now. Take small steps. Your relatives may want their life to improve, but it feels like it's not possible. Work with your relatives to break down the goals into small steps. Progress may be slow, but reassure and encourage them by noting and praising each small success made. What if my relative withdraws from other people? In other words, they're isolated. Your relative may feel that they do not want to see you or other people. Doctors sometimes call this social withdrawal. The following that I'm going to share now, I think may help you. Lower your expectation to a realistic level and do not put too much pressure on them. If this is a recent problem, ask your relative whether there is something bothering them. Let them know that they can come to you if they have any problem and they want to talk about. Think about whether your relative might feel unsure in social situations. Take things slowly to help rebuild their confidence. Keep the number of people to a minimum, keep conversation short, and avoid issues that can become too emotional. You could try asking them to buy something from a shop, order something from a cafe, sit with a family person in a public place, ask your relative where they would feel most comfortable. If your relative feels low, they may be willing to speak to an emotional support line or their doctor. With the right treatment, they might start to overcome the problems they have been having. You could suggest that your relative tries going to a day center or a support group with other people who have a mental illness. Anger and aggression. How do you respond to that? Most people with mental illness are no more aggressive or violent than anyone else. But for some people, feelings of anger and aggression can be linked to a mental health problem. Preventing anger and aggression. Try to work out which situations make your relatives aggressive. Keep a diary. Keeping a diary may help you. You may be able to work out ways of avoiding these situations. For example, talking about certain topics might upset your relatives, or your relatives may become angry if you ask them to do too much. People can be more aggressive if they have taken drugs or alcohol. It is likely to be harder to reason with someone if they have taken substances. If your relative is getting help from NHS or social services, get in touch with staff to talk about the situation. If you live with your relative and they often get aggressive towards you, you may wish to change your living arrangements. This could be going to stay with a friend or a family member for a short period of time. If you feel that you or anyone else is in danger, you should call the police straight away or right away. Don't tell your relatives that they are angry. Try, you seem angry instead. So, in other words, don't just say, oh, you're angry. Just say, you seem angry. Put them on the spot. Be prepared to repeat yourself and be patient. Use your relative's name. Don't talk down to them or argue. Respect their feelings. Don't tell them that they shouldn't be angry. Try not to get upset or angry yourself. Use a calm voice and keep a neutral facial expression. If your relative says something nasty about you, try saying, I understand that you think X, but I don't agree with that. Admit if you have made a mistake. Ask for more time before responding if you need it. Do not put your own safety at risk. If the things you have tried haven't worked, or if things are getting worse, leave the situation. If you feel that there is a serious risk of violence, call the police. Anxiety and risky behavior. How can I help with anxiety? Anxiety can be a difficult part of mental illness to deal with. Your relative might worry about things that may not happen. They may think about the worst thing that can happen, or they may feel anxious about a specific event, such as an appointment or a job interview coming up. I know I've gone through that before. Try not to talk too fast or too loudly. In other words, you don't want to be an auctioneer, like 2.5, 5 years, 500 million, 7.5 million, 10 million, 50. See, I am an actual auctioneer. In other words, they don't want you to talk so quick that it makes it virtually impossible for him or her to understand what you're saying. There's no reason to rush. Take your time, be patient, and don't show any emotion of anger, but try to show an emotion of love and concern for him or her. That would be my opinion. Let me see. But your relative might not always be open to talk about practical ways forward. They may think that nothing will help them and feel hopeless. If they don't want to do this when you first ask them, you can ask them again later. Try to be patient. Now, your relative also might be feeling a little bitter about the situation if they've prepared for it. Mental illness can make people act in a risky way. This could include spending too much, drinking and taking drugs, or having more sexual partners. And that can be dangerous. There's AIDS. There's all sorts of communicable diseases, herpes. I mean, these are things to take into consideration when you're talking with them. But these are things that they if they're in these kinds of behavior, it's risky. Driving too fast or having more sexual partners. Um, you can try and help and support your relative by telling your relative that you are there to support them, that you're talking to your relative about what might happen because of their behavior, suggesting ways that could be safer, and seeing whether your relative would like to speak to their doctor about their mental health. They may not be worried about their risky behavior, but but there may be other things that do worry them. Overdependency and lying. What if my relative becomes overdependent? If your relative finds it hard to do things, you may want to help him. For example, you might help them fill in benefit forms or get up in the morning, pay their bills, eat properly, go to appointments, and things for themselves, and let them do things for themselves. And you might feel a little stressed out too. How to help? Set boundaries. Take steps to slowly build your relative's confidence and independence by agreeing goals. To start with, your relative's goals may be to, make a mental, make a meal from scratch, walk the dog, or fill in a form. Get a careers assessment. You might have to do more than you want to do because your relative is particularly unwell. Contact your local authorities' social care team to ask for a cares assessment if you are finding it hard to cope. They may be able to arrange additional help or break for you and your relatives. Get help from professionals. If your relative is under the Community Mental Health Team, CMHT, you could talk to their care coordinator. Their care plan may help them develop independent living skills. For example, by getting help from an occupational therapist or supported housing. Is lying part of mental illness? And then I'm going to sum up and then I'm going to open it up. Lying is deliberately saying something that isn't true. People might lie too. They might lie to get a job, get more money, sex, power, or something else they want, protect other people, or change the behaviors of others. Lying and mental illness. Lying is common in the general population, and people do it for all sorts of reasons. Lying is not a symptom of mental illness. We are not aware of any research that shows whether it is more common for people with mental illness to lie. You might find it helpful to keep a record of your relatives' lies or any manipulative behavior. It may be helpful to a doctor in the future. If someone has a delusional belief, then they will believe the things they say, even if they sound unusual. These are not lies. We give tips on how to deal with these beliefs when I first started this. How to help your relative may become defensive if you challenge them about a lie. If you do decide to challenge a lie, it can be helpful to have evidence to show it is a lie. To avoid saying you're lying or that's a lie, if you don't have any evidence, you can try questioning them, but your relative could accuse you of not trusting them. You might find it helpful to assure them that you believe them, but that you're interested to know more detail about the situation because you are worried. You may feel that your relative lies to get the money from you. If you are not willing to give them the money, explain your reasons. If you are willing to give them money, but you want to test a possible lie, ask what they need the money for. You could offer to buy the things for them if you think they are lying. And lastly, about social media, texts, and emails. Your relatives might have sent you a letter, email, or text message that worries you, or they might have posted something on social media page like Facebook. Your relative may have written something upsetting about you, or something that made you think that they were going to harm themselves or others. That might be a very specific, that might have been very specific, or they might have written something vague, such as, what's the point? These situations are difficult because you won't always know where your relative is. You may not have enough direct contact to be able to weigh up whether they are at risk. And if you have not seen the message quickly, your relative might not feel the same way when you read it. Each situation will be different, but you could think about the following. Will it help if I respond? Think about the think about the impact your response will have on your relative. Will it harm your relationship if you don't respond at all? If I need to respond, should I do it now or should I wait? If the situation seems urgent, you may wish to respond as soon as you can. Other times, you may feel that you have time to think about a response. How should I contact them? You don't have to respond directly to their message. You could ring them or visit them. By ringing them, meaning call them. You might find it easier to see your relative in person or find out where they are so that you can offer more support and try to get them to help um, if they need it. This always depends on your circumstances, but think about the following. I'm sorry to hear about the way you're feeling. Is there anything I can do to help? It seems as though things have been really hard for you recently. I am here if you need me. Now, I'm going to stop at that point. I had more, um, but I just want to remind you the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, even though I spelled hotline wrong, I put a B there instead of an L, but whatever. The number is 1-800 273 8255. Now, the reason why I talked about the relative is because in the past several times that we've been doing this space on Mental Health Awareness Month, we have talked about schizophrenia. We have talked about delusional thinking before. We've covered all of this stuff, is what I'm saying, and then some. We've covered schizophrenia, what it means. We've covered OCD, what that means. We covered all sorts of psychological stuff that I had read to you from the American Psychiatric Association as well as from the Mayo Clinic during the week. And this is from, it's not, I got this from a resource, but it doesn't, oh, I think it might have been done. This one might have also been done by the Mayo Clinic. I'm not sure, but I don't take any credit. I'm just reading this, what I printed off of the internet when I found this. Oh, it's from the Mayo Clinic, I believe. So it's all legit. So having said that, Tanya will go first. If she has something to say, Tanya, feel free. And then if you want to speak on the topic, or if you have something personal you'd like to get off your chest, I'm not talking. This isn't a permission slip to go gossip about anybody, slander anybody, or air your dirty laundry. This is about mental health and mental illness. So having said that, on the bottom left, you know what to do. Your microphone's there. Just click it. And now, Tanya, you want to share anything? Please feel free.
Yeah, I sure do. Um, so, mental health is something that a lot of people feel like, oh, I can spot somebody out, or I notice something about someone, or I can do this, or I don't, there's nothing wrong with me. It's something you can't see, like somebody, cuts themselves, bleed, you can see it right away, right? It's blood everywhere, this and that, but you can meet somebody and they look like they're perfect in every aspect of a way, but then something happens and it triggers them, and then they go down this tangent, or they didn't get their normal one day, the next day they didn't get enough sleep, or something triggered them. I always, when I was younger, I used to argue with people in general, like as far as, try to help them or try to like get there. But I come to realize you can't fix people that don't want to be fixed. Number one. Number two, I'm not a doctor. Number three, I feel like we should accept the people. Once you start accepting people as that's the way they are, and not try to like change them, because sometimes some people might have certain type of condition that you don't know about, that has been going on for a long time, or they don't tell anyone. So illness or mental health, you want to call it, can a trigger in anyone's life at any period of their life. When I think about a lot of different things, I think about, like, for example, like Alzheimer. A lot of people think that, what comes first, right? Does mental illness, was that early on that person's life, and then it triggered, and then they didn't really look into it, but then Alzheimer occurred, or dementia, or could it be that it could be another form of mental illness? So that's how I feel like, we can go back and forth of when does mental illness comes up to dementia or borderline, because, like, I'll share my personal story. Like, my mother-in-law, she was ill. I mean, I really, and everyone kept, they were saying that no, something's wrong with her. She's schizo, she's this and that. And the doctor gave her so much medication that she literally forgot about stuff, because she was highly medicated. And they didn't try to figure out what's wrong with her. They just kind of like medicated her all through her life. And so it got to the point that when she's upset, instead of trying to figure out why she's upset, she just took a pill. So that mental illness that they said she had manifests into other things, but then you don't quite know yet as far as what came first. Was it the mental illness that happened, and then because she's older, that they call it dementia now? Which come first, right? Or it could have been like she had the mental illness, and the doctor didn't help her by just giving her medication. So again, I can go on about this type of thing, but when you see your loved one going through changes and they don't believe that there's anything wrong with them, that something's wrong with us, it's the hardest part, especially as your loved one. So when just try to be caring, and I always say, you can't argue with someone that has mental illness. You can't, because they will always win. That's my thought about mental health, and especially when it comes to your loved one. So, acceptance is the key, and you can't change something that's science. It's like psychologically and physically that's happening to the person. So what you can do is be there for them and love them and accept them and try to help them in any way you can.
Absolutely agree 100,000% and then some. Um, it's right on what you're saying. People have to realize that if they're delusional, like, I'll give you an example. When my father was alive, he got diagnosed with senior senility. And one day I was in the kitchen with my mother and my father, and it'd been pretty much sunny all day long. And then at that, I'm going back many, many, many years. This is not recent. This is literally years ago, maybe 15, 16 years ago or more. So my son had called, maybe it was 14 years ago. My son had called, talked to my father. I heard my father tell my older son it had been raining all day. So I just smiled at him because he was great all day. And then right away, once he said that, I knew it was a delusional thought. So I didn't say anything to him. I said, "Oh, can I talk to Chris?" To Aaron for a minute. That's my oldest son's name. So he said, "Sure." So I went into my bedroom and closed the door so he couldn't hear it. And I explained to my son what was going on. And he said, "Yeah, I kind of figured that because some of the other stuff he said didn't make too much sense." So you're right. They're not going to understand it because at the time that they believing their delusional thought, they believe it's extremely real. So it's very important that you don't agree with them on their belief if it's wrong. And that's what was reported that I had read from the Mayo Clinic tonight. Okay. You don't cater to their belief in the sense that you don't say, "Oh, well, you're right," when you know factually they're wrong. You can't, because otherwise it can intensify their thinking. And if you now can become an enabler unintentional by telling them, "Oh, yeah, you're right," when in fact that could give them confidence, a false confidence, to go ahead and do something that they shouldn't do. So you have to find that balance. And it's no different than if you're dealing with one of your friends. If you're dealing with one of your friends, it's the same thing. You kind of have to watch what you say to them when they're going through, especially if they're bipolar and they're in a manic state or they're in the low state. I mean, people can't help. Look, mental illness is just that. It's an illness. It's no different than heart disease or diabetes. They're a disease. It's an illness.
Chris is here.
Who is? Oh, hi,
Chris, can we make him a
yeah,
co-host?
yeah. I'm going to do that right now. Hi, Chris. You snuck in on me late, but that's okay. um, but in any case, yeah, I didn't know if since Amelia or social chats, if you guys wanted to say anything. Why didn't he go up to? Oh, I have to invite you that way first. Okay.
Yeah,
You have to
sorry.
invite him up.
Sorry, I'm late.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I know you whose space you were in, and yeah, if you'd like to speak, please on the tap your microphone, which is on the bottom left of your phone, and one of us will be happy to accept you to come up as a speaker, and you can say whatever you want.
So Cynthia, you're a makeup artist. Oh, here we go.
Good. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
So, did you have a comment or a question for us or whatever?
I was in a space earlier. It was a South American space, and it was about justice, but it veered into mental health when I got there. And there were a lot of people in there, and they said, you know, some people have mental health issues and physical issues, physical disabilities, and it's a whole different monster to deal with every day. And you can't just tell these people to have an attitude of gratitude because sometimes they're in pain and it's hard to look past that. So I just wanted to share that a little bit.
It's so true. I'm gonna add as a speaker. Here comes Paul.
Hey,
I
Paul.
just brought him up.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Just saying, hey, Paul. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. When it comes to mental health, I just want to say when it comes to grief and when it comes to sadness, don't be the one that says, what happened? How did it happen? Because it's not the way to address someone. Just try to be patient, understanding, and just let them vent. You know, let them talk. Don't just be like, oh, how did this happen? Because most of the time in our society, people are just fresh. And that's not the way to address crises such as mental health or other situations.
Yeah, I know, Paul, you weren't in the room, or at least I didn't see you. We just went over the do's and the don'ts, so that's a good suggestion. Going back to, I don't know how Sesame Malia. I started. What is
You can
it?
say Sensi.
Sensi. Thank you.
Yes.
I would agree with that. I actually caught a little bit from the South American space myself. I was there for about 10 minutes and then left because I had to get this done. And they were spot on from what I heard. They have an excellent psychiatric program over there. I was reading about it on the internet. It's basically the same here in the United States as well as in England. Psychology is psychology, and behavior of man is always the same, regardless of a person's culture may be different. Your behavioral things when you get a mental illness is just that. The illnesses work the same, but it causes different things in different people and how they respond to it.
And another thing that can, and another thing that can contribute to mental health is stress. And the best way to reduce that stress is to provide support. When you look at all of these other countries that have paid maternity leave, paid vacation, paid paternity leave, a lot of people are much more happier because they have that breath. Because most of the time, people are just working, 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 and when you're in this never ending circle of just work and no support or no time just to breathe, it can really affect your health and affect how you are. Like my mother was like so out of it because she was working nonstop as a bartender and a teacher. So when we have like means of to reduce stress, that can be very helpful to tackling mental health problems.
Yeah, stress can trigger a lot of things emotionally in people. Now, think of I'm going to use the word normal. Let's say that we're all normal. Your thought processes are normal, but yet we all get upset from different stresses, whether it be at a job, whether it be in a relationship you're in with somebody, whether it's your family life, your job, whatever. There's always stress. Oh, I forgot to go do this. Now, how am I going to do that? I'm going to be late now for the doctor's appointment. There's all sorts of different stresses that come up naturally, and some are caused by people to come up unnecessarily. So stress, if as we're normal, we usually get upset, but we control ourselves. We don't go off the deep. People with mental health issues or mental illnesses, they may go off the deep. And so that's why you have to have a balance on what you're doing. So the stress that they have, they might have to get removed from that environment and put in a much less stressful environment. I know somebody that went into one of the psychiatric wards. I don't remember how long she was up there, but she was saying that she made a phone call, and I guess it's near where the nurses' stations sit, they're psychiatric nurses. And I guess she was getting upset. She was yelling back. I don't know if, I think she said she was talking to her family member, could have been her mom, dad, whatever. But the nurse, from what she said, yelled over to her and says, "I'm sorry, but you're going to have to either hang up or change your subject because we don't want you upset." So in a hospital environment, the phones, from my understanding, are in close vicinity. They don't let you have your cell phones unless you were able to work it out with the psychiatrist or the psychologist. But predominantly, it's a phone that they can use. But if unless you're talking to your own therapist, if you call your own doctor and they get upset, from my understanding, they won't say anything to you. But if it's not a call from your doctor and you start raising your voice, they're going to do what I just said that she told me they did. And then I checked with some other people that were in mental health and know about those kinds of facilities and said it was true. So I have no reason to doubt it. You can do your own research on it. So stress is an important factor. You have to respect them as human beings. And and you know, that's why I keep talking about the stigma. And that's why I keep using the example from the American Psychiatric Association, that if you have a heart problems or you have even a cold or whatever, it's an illness. You take pills for it. You take an aspirin. Well, for mental illness, you take pills for it. It's the same thing. If your leg is sore and you have to take Tylenol because you're in pain, that's what they take. When you're in mental illness, it's a pain emotionally and perhaps in the thoughts, and the medication they give you hopefully calm down and take away that pain. Anyone else? Oh, I see Muhammad is here. If you'd like to say anything, just hit your microphone and we'll let you up. Going back to Sensi, I think I said that right.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, in our other space, we've covered anything from forced rape, which is basically the perpetrator wanting power, even though it's a sexual act that he did on the woman, or if he got forbid raped the guy. We've talked about that. We have talked about people with anxiety disorders, all sorts of stuff. So that's why tonight I decided to just go lightly about how to support a family relative, which can also be applied to a friend. So as far as the terminologies for those that might have been new in the room, you can always look up the different terms, and maybe I'll do a refresher later on, because that can be helpful. So basically, it's like, for me, it was like building a house. I lay the foundation, and then I have to do the outer walls, and then I got to work inside, and eventually a roof goes on. So for me, when I first started this, because it's mental health month, awareness month, it really put it on my heart to do this. And that's why I went over a lot of the different terminologies. There's at minimum of 300 major diagnosis of mental illness, which I'm not going to cover right now. It'd be way too much. So if anybody has any kind of personal issues, like I suffered from depression, for example, I go to the VA, the outpatient clinic, and I have a pill that they give me, and I'm able to function fine in society. So I didn't know if you wanted to add anything on that. Otherwise, if you don't, I'll go back over to Tanya.
I didn't want to add anything to that, but I just wanted to say that I have I think there are a lot of people with hidden mental health issues. I notice my interactions with men sometimes they're very abrupt and they are very like they dream up some scenarios and they get very dismissive and distant. And I don't know if there are mental health issues, but it may be hidden issues. So we can only help people as much as it's discovered, as much as their consistent behavior shows shards of mental illness. Otherwise, it's really difficult to um, catch it sometimes. But I'm not just saying this because of my bad experiences with them. It's something that I've wondered about them because, there have been situations where they've gotten violent with me and they have blamed me for things that I didn't do and just been all around nonsensical. So I wonder sometimes if there are hidden mental health issues that are not tackled because of stigma and because sometimes it's hard. You can't just charge somebody with something, it has to have scientific backing to it.
Well, that's very true. Chris, could you mute your mic, please? Um, Thank you. Otherwise, it creates an echo. If I can ask, what country are you from?
I'm in Canada.
Oh, Canada has an excellent program for psychiatric care. I would try to get a hold of one of the professionals, whether it's a caseworker, a social worker, a psychologist, psychiatrist. I would go and just check in with them because even though they harmed you, it sounds like to me anyway, and I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not licensed to do anything. This is just general conversation and giving an opinion. It sounds like you have some forms of trauma, and trauma can carry over to your adult life. And if trauma happened in your adult life, certain things, if it keeps triggering these feelings like, what did I do wrong to deserve this? Why are they disrespecting me? Why are the men treating me like this? You've done nothing wrong. They shouldn't have acted like jerks. And could there be hidden psychological issues going on? Absolutely. The person could be in a state of denial. They may have mental illnesses and were off of their medication, and now they're worse. They could have dual diagnosis. They could be doing drugs all at the same time and then not taking their medication. They just want the relief of the pain. So they go out and get illicit drugs from the street foolishly. And that creates more problems for them because now they've got both problems, a mental issue as well as substance abuse. And that I talked about not last night, but the night before. So there are reasons. And yeah, I think that there's more people in the world that have mental health issues that don't even know it because they don't want to hear what others are saying on how they've missed a lot of these social cues, and they may isolate themselves for a while. But I think it's important for you to know that you did nothing wrong, and I would maybe you should just forgive yourself, even though you didn't, and just love yourself. Just love yourself. So
Solid advice.
okay, so I hope that was some help, and then
It absolutely definitely helps. The idea of forgiveness is very, very paramount. and in every direction, forgiveness of self and forgiveness of others. And it helps sometimes, excuse me, to go back and analyze the situation if it helps. If it doesn't help and puts you in a negative state, it's good to exit that situation.
Absolutely. Is there anybody else that would like to comment? It's 7:30. We started at 6:30. I'm not going to do a marathon thing. I know that my great friend Tanya had done one the other day, and for 8 hours plus. I don't know how she gets the strength, and now she's helping me do this. So thank you to my co-host, Chris. I also want to thank you for coming. Chris had something he was doing. He was in a different space, which is understandable. Ariel's a good man. So, I want everybody to take their time to spread the word. Tanya, do you have anything that you'd like to closing remarks?
No, well, yeah, I think that, don't take anything personal. Don't, just because if someone doesn't react right away or didn't respond right away or didn't do something right away when you want them to, does not mean that they don't care or something's wrong with them, because there is nothing wrong with someone not answering a phone call right away or a text message or whatever right away. So then if you feel like your friend is going through some problems, some issues, maybe because they're not responding to you right away, instead of accusing, take them out to lunch, have a conversation in a positive way, not in a negative way where you make someone feel inferior or feel bad about themselves. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is not to do that, because people, when you accuse people in general, if someone accuses me of something, you tend to become defensive. So, be mindful on that before you start accusing people of anything.
Yeah, I look at it like this. I know what it's like to be falsely accused of things, and it hurts. I mean, not that they hurt my feelings, it's just that it hurts in the sense that people who knew me started to believe the lies. And it's like, but you've known me all my life. How can you? And I get baffled by it. And then they realize, oh, yeah, that's true. And they find out later that the individual had lied. So, you have to keep your mental wit about you, your discernment. If they're going to be talking negative, you don't have to receive their nonsense that they're speaking over you. You just reject it. And tell them to. That's my other phone, but I have somebody here that will answer that. I apologize for the background noise. Actually, let me mute this for a second.
I've been there. But while we're waiting for Michael to finish his thoughts, but again, I'm not a doctor, or I'm not a healthcare practitioner. I work with a whole bunch of people, and I just hope that everyone will understand that we live in a society where everybody thinks like somebody got to be at fault. Someone did this, and they meant to do this, and they went out their way to hurt me. Try to have compassion. Try to understand it's not about you, and don't make that the person that you feel that something is wrong, and that they, even if you think that they have a mental illness, or even if they do have mental illness and they are told that psychologically, and the doctor has said this on their file, right, that they have some type of a schizophrenia or bipolar personality or anything like that. But as a friend, as someone that you're a loved one, you care for that loved one, you don't ever make that loved one feel so inferior, so defensive toward whatever you're trying to accuse them of. Because I don't think most people in general don't like being accused. Most people in general, just almost everyone I know, not most people, everyone, we want to be loved and accepted and feel safe. And if you're behaving a way that you're feeling that you think that you're trying to help that person, but really, if you're not making them feel safe, who's at fault right then and there, right? So again, let's try to be kinder to each other. Practice empathy, not sympathy. Sympathy, I don't think nobody wants to be sympathetic to them. Feel empathy for them. Understand. Walk in their shoes, and then see what they feel like, and hear it in their voice.
Yeah, that's so important. Everything that she just shared is so true. We're not perfect. You and I, we're not perfect. So just because somebody has an illness, why would you want to try to mock him or her? I'm not saying you guys, but in general. Some people are just cruel because they lack understanding. They just don't see it as an illness. And they were taught wrong. So it takes people like you and I to spread the good word that mental health is no different, as I shared before, and I reiterated from the American Association Psychiatric Journal or whatever it's called. No different than if you have heart disease or diabetes. It's managed through medication, exercise, and rest. Same thing with mental illness. It's exercise, medication, and a therapist. You need those three ingredients. You do. And if you get if you don't have insurance, you don't have money, that's a big thing. That's tough. But if you're feeling like you want to harm yourself or somebody else, they'll take you for free. You would call 911 or you would call 1-800-273-8255, the National Suicide Hotline number. And you know what? If you see somebody that you believe from whatever they're saying or doing or a combination that they may harm themselves or they're plotting to harm themselves or somebody else, definitely notify the authorities by dialing 911 because you don't want them to hurt themselves or somebody else. In this state, it's called Baker acting. That means they realize that the person has some sort of illness, potential illness going on. And so they will Baker act you. A doctor can Baker act you, a nurse, and obviously the court, and obviously a policeman can. Nobody else can. That's the group that can. And they put you in a very safe place. So you get evaluated and they help you with the treatment to get you thinking sanely. And so that you don't go out and do that. But you have I believe we all have a fiduciary responsibility to try not only to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe, but everybody else safe as well. So that's why I say, if you hear something or you're seeing something and your gut feeling saying, this person just seems off, you can still call the police and tell them, look, they're just acting strange. And they'll come out and they'll investigate it. It's better that something is said than not at all, and that you become sorry for after because he or she committed a crime because you didn't say something. So you got to look for the cues. I mean, you don't want to make it a habit of constantly calling on the same person if it's not true either, but that's another issue for another day. And try to show people kindness. There are a lot of people in the world today that have grown up in a broken household. Parents are divorced. Maybe they got shuffled into a foster care and they got lost in the system. And therefore they got some mental issues from the trauma that they suffered. They couldn't understand why their parents didn't love them, or at least that's why they think that their parents didn't love them. And they very well may have loved them, but couldn't afford to. So because they loved them so much and wanted them to have everything, they may have put them up for adoption. And so now you get a different set of parents that will love you. So in life, there are many situations and different circumstances that can create things in somebody's mind. It starts with the eyes seeing it and the ears hearing it. And if what you're hearing and you perceive it incorrectly can give you wrong thoughts. And where are your thoughts? In your mind, your brain. It's a vital part of the human body, as you know. Let's get it fixed. Let's get some help. You go to the doctor when you don't feel good, right? If you're throwing up or you got a stomach ache or severe headaches, migraines, you go to a doctor, right? Or you go to your annual checkup, right? Well, going to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, they're doctors too. It's the exact same thing. And I'm going to ask Sonia before I end this one last time to talk about the importance of getting your hormones checked, because I actually believe this. And I believe that what she says is good advice. She's not taking anything away from psychiatry or psychologist or psychology. She believes it. But there are some doctors that will perform a hormone test on you, and there are others that won't. The group of doctors that she sees will. So, Tanya, if you could please explain briefly, because it's getting late, about the
Well, I mean,
hormones.
like, my doctors are functional medicine doctors. Um, we want to know what the function of each systems are. And so when you go to a doctor, most doctors just kind of like give you a blood test. But if you don't ask like specifically, like, hey, I need a full panel, female panel, that's includes my thyroid, all my estrogen. I mean, women, we have like 3 estrogens. If you didn't know that, you're just going to get tested on whatever the doctor. And most of the time, doctors don't even talk about this kind of stuff. They're like, oh yeah, it came back normal. There's no low or high, but they don't even know what optimal is. So again, those are the kind of things you have to ask your doctor. And if you have a doctor that doesn't believe in checking your hormones or getting your optimal health, then go out and find one. Because I feel like if you don't find one, why you continue just kind of like, if the doctor doesn't want to know what your body, what's functioning at its best or low or where it should be, then you're going to the wrong doctor. You're just kind of like putting a Band-Aid. And always remember, your body is like a machine. So if you had a car and that car was running, had an oil leak, do you continue putting oil in that car for it to run, or do you figure out where that leak is coming from what hose or whatever your car is running? So again, it's the same analogy. If you have a problem with your body and you need to find out what's wrong with it before you try to put a Band-Aid over it. So those are my thoughts. Thank you for letting me share.
Oh, honey, you can share anything you want. You're one of my co-hosts. You have just as much right as I do hosting it. I would never stop you. Same thing with Chris, but for tonight he's tired, so he's just wants to be a listener. Is there anybody else that would either like to come up and say something, or those that are already up, feel free. I think I'm going to invite you to speak. I don't know if you're just saying hi or not, but I just sent you an invitation. If you want to speak, come on up. I'll give you a minute or so. And I want to thank you all for coming in. I've always said, I don't care if it's one person in the room or a trillion. I know a lot of people want 25 people so that you can get this great tool so I forgot the gentleman's name, Andrew, from England. It will automatically go on and he'd send you the bells and whistles. This is mental health. I'm not concerned about getting anything. I'm concerned about sharing truth to hopefully pass on from what I've read to whoever wants to listen, because that helps self-educate you. Maybe it's more confirmation of something that you believe, that in psychiatry, they believe that you need to do this or that. So maybe you got something confirmed to you, or maybe you pick something up that you didn't know, or maybe you have a thought and then you found out it was contrary to what was shared. You need to get your thought, and that would include me too, lined up with what the actual truth is, rather than believe a lie or deception. Okay. That's why I really, if I got 25 people in a room, wonderful. But that's not my motive. My motive is to love people and help people to the best ability that I possibly can. So for me to be able to talk about mental illness, having mental illness issue myself from depression, and seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist, I understand it. I mean, I'm pretty sound according to them. Pretty normal according to them. I just have a problem with not enough chemical secretions in my brain to keep it balanced so I don't get depressed. But this pill that they have me on makes it balanced. So I'm very appreciative of the doctors there. And as I was trying to make my point is that whether it's one person or a trillion people, so long as you listen, if you have questions when I open it up like I did, if I have an answer, I'll give it to you. If I don't know, I'll simply say I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a social worker. I have no degrees in psychology whatsoever. I'm a layman, and all I've done was taken some stuff off that I've researched from the internet, reiterated it out to the audience, and I take no credit because it's not I don't plagiarize, and it's not mine to take. I didn't do anything except reiterate the words on a page. And I really want to thank you all again for coming. I thank my co-host Tanya for coming in and recording it. I don't know how this woman does it. She's amazing. She helps me and a quadrillion other people in spaces. She's just a doll. That's just my personal
The
opinion.
only thing I couldn't help you this time is running the Diacon software. It's not working.
Well, that's okay. I mean, it would have been nice to know, but like I said, my motive, I want people to hear what mental health really is and mental illness, and try to remove the stigma, so that if you yourself have a mental illness and you felt ashamed, or that you felt that there was nothing that could be done, or that you're at fault, no, that's not true. You can see a therapist and the help is waiting for you, and the help you can get in abundance. Any final thoughts? And thank you, Chris, for coming up too. Tanya, you have any final thoughts? And hi, Brett, too.
No.
I just saw you.
I think we covered pretty much everything.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for those who have listened. And today is what? What's today? Tuesday?
Today's Tuesday.
Okay. I'm going to do another space then on Thursday. I'm trying to skip every other day, and the time will always be 6:30 unless Tanya, who does a lot of the recording, tells me we have to change the time for whatever her reason is. Then we'll change it, but for right now it's 6:30.
No, we're good.
Okay, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time here in the United States. Just in case somebody's from around the world listening, it's always Eastern Standard Time when I host. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for participating and listening. And I hopefully will see you all on Thursday at 6:30. Please tell your friends about this. Let them come. Let them learn. Stay safe. Make sure that you get your